The Kelvorian colony on Threshold 7 represented the absolute pinnacle of organized sentient existence, or so the Kelvorians insisted to anyone who'd listen, which was mostly themselves. Every structure stood exactly 47.3 meters from its neighbor. Every transport route followed probability-mapped efficiency corridors. Every meal arrived in standardized nutrition cubes calibrated to 0.01% precision. The Kelvorians had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of making life as predictable as a metronome, and they were insufferably proud of it. Threshold 7 itself was a water-rich world with breathable atmosphere, modest gravity, and absolutely nothing interesting happening on it, which made it perfect for colonization by species who considered interesting to be a diplomatic term for catastrophically unregulated. The planet had been surveyed, categorized, subdivided into sectors, and assigned purpose designations before the first foundation was poured. Sector 7G Residential, Sector 12M Agricultural Processing, Sector 3B Recreational Green Space, Authorized Fauna Only, Prohibited Flora list available in Appendix 47J. The colony housed approximately 40,000 beings from 17 different species, all of whom had accepted the Kelvorian Residential Covenant, a document so comprehensive that its executive summary required its own executive summary. Everyone followed the rules. Everyone filed the proper permits. Everyone consumed their nutrition cubes without complaint, because complaining required filing a grievance initialization form, and nobody wanted to deal with that paperwork. Then Marcus Webb showed up. Nobody quite knew how he'd bypassed the immigration processing queue, though theories ranged from clerical error to he just walked past the checkpoint eating a sandwich and everyone assumed someone else had cleared him. Humans had that effect on bureaucracy. They moved through it like water through a chain-link fence, technically encountering resistance but somehow ending up on the other side anyway. By the time the Kelvorian colonial administration realized they had an unauthorized resident, Marcus had already been on planet for 3 weeks. He'd claimed a small plot in Sector 8F in allocated future development zone and done something that would haunt the Kelvorians' orderly dreams for months to come. He'd built a treehouse. Inspector Velk of the Zoning Compliance Department made the discovery during a routine boundary survey. Velk was a Kelvorian, naturally. Only Kelvorians found zoning compliance engaging enough to pursue professionally. He possessed 4 eye stalks, each capable of independent focus, which made him exceptionally good at spotting regulatory violations. On that particular morning, his northwestern eye stalk detected something that made his chromatic skin flush an alarmed purple. "Impossible," Velk whispered, consulting his tablet. "Sector 8F is designated empty. Empty means empty. Empty cannot contain. What is that?" What it was, objectively speaking, was a structure roughly 6 meters off the ground, built into and around a massive bluewood tree. It featured a platform, walls constructed from local timber, a slanted roof, and most horrifying to Velk's sensibilities, no right angles whatsoever. The entire thing looked like it had been assembled by someone who'd heard about architecture third-hand and decided to improvise enthusiastically. Worse still, smoke was rising from it. Velk's skin cycled through several colors rarely seen outside medical emergencies. Smoke meant combustion. Combustion meant open flame. Open flame in an unregulated structure meant he couldn't even complete the thought. His tablet nearly slipped from his gripping appendage as he triggered the emergency beacon. Within minutes, a response team arrived, 3 more inspectors, 2 security officers, and 1 very confused sanitation engineer who'd been in the area and got swept up in the mobilization. They stood in a semicircle, staring upward at the treehouse, none of them quite certain what to do. That's when Marcus appeared on the platform, holding a long metallic implement and wearing an apron that read "Kiss the cook or don't, I'm not your supervisor." "Morning," he called down cheerfully. "You folks want some fish?" Just came off the grill. The word grill meant nothing to them. The concept of wanting fish in any form other than protein cube variant 7 aquatic meant less. But the smell drifting down from that platform, that smell meant something their nutrition cube calibrated bodies hadn't experienced in generations. It smelled like food that wanted to be eaten. "You," Velk managed, his voice crackling with static distortion. "You are conducting unauthorized construction, unauthorized combustion. Unauthorized, what are you doing up there?" "Making lunch," Marcus replied, as if this explained everything. He held up something that definitely used to be a fish, but now bore char marks and looked distressingly appetizing. "Caught these this morning from the lake in sector, or whatever that lake's sector number is. The big one with the fish in it. Sector 4L, aquatic reserve, fishing prohibited without permit." Velk shrieked. "Huh. Well, the fish didn't seem to know that." Marcus took a bite. Little bit of smoke, little bit of heat. These turned out perfect. Inspector Velk did what any reasonable Kelvorian would do when confronted with cascading regulatory violations. He scheduled an emergency committee meeting. The Kelvorian Emergency Regulatory Response Committee met in conference room 7, optimal acoustic properties, seating capacity 47, ambient temperature maintained at 21.3 degrees, exactly 90 minutes after the treehouse discovery. The chamber filled with representatives from every affected department, which turned out to be every department, because Marcus's violations were impressively comprehensive. Chairman Dalvex called the meeting to order by striking the ceremonial efficiency gong. "We face an unprecedented situation," he announced, his tone suggesting this unprecedented situation might actually kill him. "A human has constructed an unsanctioned dwelling using unprocessed materials, implemented open-flame thermal processing of biomass, and is currently consuming the results." The list of violations spans 17 regulatory categories. 18 corrected Administrator Krill from environmental compliance. He's also creating atmospheric particulate dispersal patterns. "The smoke," someone whispered, and several committee members shuddered. Vex, the security coordinator, rose to speak. He was a Tharkon, built like a mobile tank, and generally considered the muscle of the operation, though his muscle mostly involved filing arrest reports. "I could remove him. Physically remove him. Throw him off planet." "You can't just throw people off planet," Dalvex objected. "I can throw things very well. It's literally in my species description." "That's not the point. Can we discuss the combustion issue?" interrupted Krill, whose gill flaps quivered anxiously. "Open flames. In a wooden structure. Has this human checked the fire suppression requirements, the permit applications, the safety inspections?" "He hasn't checked anything," Velk confirmed miserably. "I asked him about permits. He asked me what those were. Then he offered me fish." The committee absorbed this in horrified silence. "Did you?" Dalvex hesitated. "Did you accept the fish?" "No, of course not. That would be accepting unregulated biological matter from an uncertified source. The forms alone would take weeks." But Velk's skin had flushed a slightly warmer shade of purple, and several committee members exchanged knowing looks. Councillor Thren, representing the Merchants Association, raised a tentacle. "Setting aside the violations momentarily, which we absolutely should not do, Did anyone else detect the aroma? We're not discussing the aroma, Dalvex said firmly. The aroma was notable, Thren continued. Significantly more notable than Nutrition Cube Variant 7, Aquatic. Nutrition Cube Variant 7, Aquatic, provides optimal protein distribution and meets all dietary requirements, recited Administrator Fox from Nutritional Services automatically. Flavor optimization is irrelevant to nutritional adequacy. Yes, very adequate, Thren agreed. Except this human's fish apparently violates adequacy by being, what's the word, good. The committee erupted into overlapping arguments about regulatory philosophy, the definition of adequate, and whether enjoyment of food constituted a violation of the spirit of nutritional efficiency. Chairman Dalvex struck the gong repeatedly until order returned. The solution is obvious, he declared. We inform the human of the violations. He submits the proper remediation forms. We process them through appropriate channels. In 6 to 8 months, this resolves itself. What if he doesn't submit forms? Someone asked. Everyone submits forms, Dalvex replied with complete confidence. That's what civilized beings do. The committee dispatched a formal delegation to address Marcus the following morning. 6 officials climbed the ladder to his treehouse violation of vertical access regulations and found him tending his grill, which they now understood to be some kind of controlled combustion device for thermal processing of organic materials, though calling it controlled seemed generous. Marcus looked up from flipping what appeared to be more fish. Hey, welcome. Committee right. I figured you'd be back. Want to try the food before we do the talking thing? Usually goes better on a full stomach. We do not want your thermally processed biological matter, Dalvex stated, though his eye stalks betrayed him by focusing intently on the grill. We're here to inform you of multiple regulatory violations and initiate the remediation process. Right, the rules thing. Marcus nodded agreeably. Listen, I actually had an idea about that. What if instead of doing all the forms and waiting, there is no alternative to forms and waiting? What if I just started selling this fish, like a business? Then you could regulate the business instead of trying to undo the treehouse. Seems more efficient. The delegation stared at him. Selling, Velk repeated slowly. Yeah, like, people give me credits or whatever, I give them smoked fish. Commerce. Pretty standard stuff across the galaxy. We don't have commerce, Thren said carefully. We have centralized resource distribution systems. So you've got nobody selling anything. No restaurants, no shops. No, restaurants are inefficient. Administrator Fox interrupted. Centralized nutrition distribution eliminates redundancy and ensures optimal resource allocation. Marcus looked at them with something approaching pity. Man, that's the saddest thing I've heard all week. He pulled a fish off the grill, placed it on a wooden plank, and held it out. Seriously, try this. If you still think nutrition cubes are better after one bite, I'll fill out every form you've got. Dalvex hesitated. The fish gleamed with moisture and char marks. The smell was incredible, speaking to something primordial in his genetic memory that predated nutrition science by millions of years. This is highly irregular, he said weakly. It's lunch, Marcus corrected. Dalvex took the fish. He took a bite. His chromatic skin went through 17 colors in 3 seconds, none of which appeared in standard Kelvorian emotional indexes. Oh, he whispered. Oh no. Yeah, Marcus grinned. This is what have you done to this fish? Caught it, cleaned it, smoked it over blue wood. Little bit of salt. That's literally it. Impossible. This can't be achieved through such simple. Dulvex took another bite. Chairman privilege. I'm confiscating this as evidence. Evidence of what? Undetermined, pending investigation. Dulvex clutched the fish protectively. Inspector Velk eyed the remaining fish on the grill. I should probably also collect evidence for corroboration. Me too, added Krill. Marcus watched, amused, as the entire delegation suddenly discovered urgent needs for evidence collection. Within minutes, they were all sitting on his platform, eating fish and looking vaguely guilty about it. So, Marcus said casually, about that business license. Word spread through the colony the way information always does, inappropriately and faster than light. By the next morning, curious residents began appearing near Sector 8F, ostensibly for legitimate reasons. Boundary surveys, atmospheric testing, suddenly remembering they'd always wanted to see that specific tree, but actually hoping to investigate the aroma situation. Marcus, demonstrating either business savvy or complete obliviousness to social norms, had hung a sign from his treehouse. Marcus's treehouse, grill smoked fish, 5 credits. The Kelvorians who saw it experienced cascading emotional responses. First, outrage at the unauthorized signage. Second, confusion about credits. Third, overwhelming curiosity about what made fish worth any numerical value whatsoever. A young Kelvorian named Jex was the first public customer. His friends had dared him, which was how most social progress occurred, and he'd climbed the ladder with the resigned determination of someone absolutely certain they were making a mistake. 1 fish, please, he'd mumbled, transferring credits from his personal allocation account, which technically wasn't supposed to be used for unauthorized transactions, but technically wasn't prohibited either because nobody had imagined this scenario. Marcus handed over a plank with smoked fish, and Jex descended to where a dozen onlookers waited nervously. He took a bite. Well? Someone demanded. Jex's chromatic skin went bright gold, the Kelvorian equivalent of profound joy, rarely seen outside of successful permit approvals. Jex struggled for words. It's like nutrition cubes, if nutrition cubes had any reason to exist. The crowd surged toward the ladder. By midday, Marcus had a line. By evening, he was sold out. By the next morning, he'd quadrupled his prices and still had a line. The committee watched through surveillance feeds in mounting horror. They're buying unauthorized biomass, Administrator Fox whispered, his voice hollow. They're enjoying it. This undermines the entire nutritional efficiency framework. It's not just nutrition, Thren observed. He'd been watching the feeds closely, noting how customers lingered on the platform, talking with each other, laughing at Marcus's terrible jokes. He's created a social gathering point. People are mingling. Mingling is what happens in authorized recreation periods in designated social spaces, Dulvex objected. But even he could see this was different. The treehouse had energy, spontaneity, something that Conference Room 7's optimal acoustic properties couldn't replicate. Security Coordinator Vex crossed his massive arms. I could still throw him off planet. 20 people saw you buy fish yesterday, Krill noted. That was evidence collection. You went back for seconds. Additional evidence. The arguments continued, but underneath them ran a current of growing panic. The colony's perfect order was developing cracks, and those cracks smelled delicious. The committee's attempts to shut down Marcus's operation revealed an uncomfortable truth. He hadn't actually violated any regulations, because nobody had written regulations prohibiting what he was doing. The Kelvorian legal code was comprehensive, but it had been written by beings who couldn't conceive of someone cooking food for fun and profit. Unauthorized construction, Velk argued during an emergency session. He built it in an unallocated zone, Thren countered. Unallocated means no allocation restrictions. Unauthorized combustion. The fire code addresses combustion in residential and commercial zones. Sector 8F is neither. Unauthorized food distribution. The Nutritional Services Code addresses centralized distribution facilities. He's not a facility, he's a human in a tree. Dalvex looked like he might strike the efficiency gong hard enough to break it. There must be something. Actually, Thren interrupted smoothly. I've reviewed the merchant activity allowances in Section 47 of the Colonial Charter. Individual enterprise is permitted, provided it doesn't interfere with essential services, which this doesn't. If anything, it supplements them. The committee turned to stare at Thren, who suddenly seemed very interested in his tablet. Did you? Krill said slowly. Just argue in favor of the human. I'm arguing in favor of legal precedent. Also, I may have invested in his operation. You what? He needed someone to handle credit processing and supply chain logistics. I'm a merchant. It's what I do. Thren's skin showed colors, suggesting both defiance and slight embarrassment. Also, the fish is really good. The committee split that day into two factions: traditionalists who wanted to find some way to restore perfect order, and pragmatists who'd already tried the fish and understood they were fighting an unwinnable battle. Meanwhile, Marcus's success inspired other humans. They arrived in small groups, apparently having heard through some mysterious human communication network that Threshold 7 had both available space and no regulations prohibiting creative entrepreneurship. Within 2 weeks, the colony had a human running a coffee stand, caffeine beverages, previously unknown and now desperately needed, another offering fresh-baked bread created through thermal processing of grain matter combined with microscopic fungal organisms, which sounded horrifying until you tasted it, and a third who'd opened something called a bar where people could consume fermented liquids while talking to strangers. The Kelvorians were scandalized. They were outraged. They were forming lines at all these establishments. It's chaos, Dalvex moaned during committee meetings, which now required scheduling around lunch breaks because several members wanted to visit the food vendors. This isn't what we built. This isn't the plan. The plan didn't include food that makes people happy, Thren observed, eating something called a sandwich. Maybe that was an oversight. The traditionalist faction launched one final offensive, a comprehensive regulatory proposal that would license, categorize, and bureaucratize every aspect of the new businesses. They presented it triumphantly at a full colonial assembly, expecting overwhelming support. Instead, they faced 3,000 colonists who'd spent the last month discovering that life was more interesting with variety. The proposal was voted down by a margin of 73%. Chairman Dalvex accepted defeat with the grace of someone who'd spent his entire life believing in the system and just watched it evolve past him. Fine, he said quietly. We adapt, but there will be rules. Sensible rules. Safety codes, hygiene standards, taxation frameworks. Nobody's reading a 47-volume code about food trucks, Marcus called from the audience. A reasonable regulatory framework, Dalvex amended, that acknowledges the reality of commercial enterprise while maintaining appropriate oversight. So like 1 volume, Marcus suggested. Maybe 2? Dalvex's skin cycled through several colors before settling on resigned amber. 3 volumes. Final offer. Deal. 6 months later, Threshold 7 had transformed in ways the original planners never anticipated. The basic colonial infrastructure remained. Kelvorians still ensured the power worked and the water flowed with characteristic efficiency, but the social landscape had evolved considerably. Marcus's Treehouse grill had become a landmark. Tourists from other colonies visited specifically to eat there, and Marcus had hired staff, 2 Kelvorians and another human, to keep up with demand. The original grill had been replaced with something meeting actual fire safety standards, though Marcus had negotiated to keep the treehouse structure intact. Historical preservation, he'd called it, which made Velk's eye stalks twitch, but was technically valid. The coffee stand had expanded into a cafe. The bakery now offered 17 varieties of bread. The bar hosted live music twice weekly, performed by a mixed band that somehow made Kelvorian traditional efficiency chants sound almost jazzy. Most surprisingly, the Kelvorians themselves had started opening businesses. Administrator Fox, of all people, had launched a fusion cuisine restaurant combining human cooking techniques with traditional Kelvorian nutritional science. It turns out nutrition cubes could be reformulated into something resembling actual food, and Fox approached this challenge with the same obsessive precision he'd previously applied to regulatory compliance. Inspector Velk had left the zoning compliance department to become a food critic, writing devastatingly detailed reviews that somehow made restaurant analysis sound like structural engineering. His newsletter, Efficient Eating, had 12,000 subscribers. The Smoke Appreciation Society met monthly in a building that definitely hadn't been designated for recreational tobacco alternatives, but everyone had agreed to ignore this particular oversight. They discussed flavor profiles, wood selection, and thermal processing techniques, with the same intensity Kelvorians previously reserved for debating municipal codes. Even Councillor Thren had expanded beyond investment into opening his own establishment, a marketplace where multiple vendors sold various goods. Centralized distribution through voluntary exchange mechanisms, he called it, because Kelvorians couldn't help making everything sound bureaucratic. Everyone else called it a shopping mall. The committee, of course, had created new regulations, 89 new regulations, specifically, though in their defense these were actual reasonable safety codes and business licensing requirements rather than exhaustive treatises on proper signage font sizes. They'd also, grudgingly, acknowledged that not every aspect of life needed to be regulated down to 0.01% precision. Chairman Dulvex had written a paper titled Flexible Adaptation Protocols in Colonial Development Frameworks that took full credit for the colony's transformation. He presented it at the Kelvorian Colonial Administration Conference to thunderous applause from administrators who absolutely understood they were being lied to but appreciated the political cover. We recognized, Dulvex had explained, his skin displaying the confident blue of someone rewriting history in real time, that rigid frameworks, while providing essential structure, must incorporate adaptive capacity to optimize for unforeseen variables. The human element, while initially appearing disruptive, actually revealed opportunities for efficiency improvements through diversified resource allocation and enhanced resident satisfaction metrics. What he meant was, the humans showed up, ignored our rules, made everyone happier, and we're pretending we planned it. Marcus, sitting in his treehouse on a quiet evening, watched the colony's lights spread below him. The rigid geometric patterns remained, but now they were punctuated by irregular splashes of color, businesses, gathering spaces, places where people went not because they were scheduled to, but because they wanted to. He flipped a fish on the grill, the smoke rising into Threshold 7's twilight sky, and smiled. "Hey Marcus," someone called from below. A group of young Kelvorians, skin showing excited yellows and greens. Got room for 6 more. Always got room, Marcus called back. Come on up. The colony hadn't descended into chaos. It had simply remembered something it had forgotten while perfecting efficiency, that civilization wasn't just about organizing life but actually living it. The Kelvorians still loved their regulations, their committees, their precisely calculated distances between structures. But now they also loved gathering in tree houses to eat food that tasted good for no other reason than it tasted good, talking with strangers who became friends, discovering that unpredictability sometimes led to the best outcomes. And if you suggested to any Kelvorian that their perfect colony had been improved by a human showing up and grilling fish in a tree, they'd pull out a 17-page report with charts and efficiency metrics proving they'd actually optimized for this outcome all along. Which was fine. Let them have their reports. The fish still tasted better than nutrition cubes.